They do what they must to keep their own fires lit and whatever Mar stirred herself to bid them in the way of housework, and never be fashed to lift a finger more. All the rest fell to Dora and me. Every so often, there'd come a new miss with a desperate look about her, lugging an infant that screamed and spat up into its blanket. Mar was fond of pink-cheeked, wretched misses. She'd always take a ruined girl over a hard-faced trumper. Then Dora and I would have a baba to drag about like a doll, or carry up to the garret, if it wouldn't hush. We never could keep any of those infants long enough to love them. We'd come down one day and it'd be gone, and none of us would ask where it'd been whipped off to. Sometimes the miss it belonged to took it hard and wept. Mar never minded weeping in the kitchen, but if a Molly couldn't smile for the cullies, she'd be turned out as quick as blinking. She might sit at breakfast bawling as though she were the infant herself, if she could dry her eyes and flutter them when once she stepped foot outside the kitchen. I remember a miss who never could stop weeping, and was put out upon her arse for it. I recall standing in the hall, my hands twisting in my apron as she was hustled from the door, the bully's big hand between her shoulder blades. I was only 5 or 6, I should think. Her thin back was a quiver with tears in only the same poor dress she'd come in, for of course Mar kept back the silks. A miss could get along all right if she'd silks of her own, so it was spite as well as greed that drove Mar's hand. I went to the parlour window and watched her struggle down the road with her box, dragging it by one handle and rocking it up awake in the dirt of the street like a skiff at low tide. I pressed my face right up to the glass to see her as long as I could. I couldn't say what it was about that particular miss that caught my fancy, but I'd think of her sometimes, after that. I like to imagine that when she'd turned the corner she'd found her baby waiting there and would be mother to it again. Later, when I grew up a little and had a grasp of the trade, I wondered at Mar keeping Dora and me. She kept us and never did hire us out to the cullies whose tastes ran to kiddies, though she threatened too often enough. I suppose, in a woman like our Mar, that passed for love. The convent was so narrow that it looked to have been built in an alley, and crushed up against the houses on either side like a drunken crone held up by 2 fat fellows. Ours was the oldest house on the lane, the houses that had once stood on either side having been burned down, or torn down to make room for the new ones. Because the house couldn't spread out, it reached up. There were 5 floors, if you counted the cellar, and all the rooms were full, though the bodies in them changed about. My whole life, we never had a spare room for more than a day. In our house, we went to bed when the whole world was rising. I'd lie there and listen to the milkmaid shouting in the lane, and the women calling to those below to look out as they emptied their pots. I'd fall asleep with the sun pinking the dark behind my eyes. I always thought it the best way to live. In daylight, the world was merry and safe. At night, it was always better to be up and ready. I'd no choice in it, so it was well that I thought it so fine. Mar would never have stomached me creeping about the house in the daylight, while all the house was abed. Sleeping all day as we did, we took our breakfast when other folks had dinner at 3 or 4 o'clock. The kitchen table had been built just where it was, and took up near the whole room. You'd have had to chop it to firewood to get out of the door. We sat around it, pressed together on the benches, the misses in their silks, all bare arms and bosoms, and Dora and I always pushed to the ends of the bench, with half our arses hanging off. The bullies would put heavy bars across the front door and come to sit with us, though sometimes they stood, the room being so full. There were chairs at the head and the foot, and the bullies never did sit in them, as the men might expect to in any usual house. Mar sat always at the head of the table. The other chair was for whichever girl she saw fit to reward, whether it be a miss who'd taken good earnings the night before, or a newcomer who was proving difficult to turn and so needed softening. When Dora and I weren't making ourselves useful, we'd be huddled in the garret in the bed we shared.